the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. If you dabble in sports betting like we all do, you're probably looking for something a little bit different. Bettor Edge has solved a problem. Too much money being lost to those house lines. It's a social betting marketplace that gives you a chance to create your bets with your own prices, skipping the vig, skipping the juice. It's safe, it's reliable, it's fast. It's everything you want in a gambling site related to the sports world, as we are here at Spot Track. In fact, use code SPOTTRAC, SPOTRAC at sign up. Get yourself $20 on the house and go have some fun with the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs, Major League Baseball's regular season, or how about some NFL futures? Because we are at schedule week, something we'll be diving into down the road here in just a few days as the full NFL lineup is released. Visit bettoredge.com. That's bettoredge.com today. My name is Ginnitti. It is Monday, May 12th. Happy Mother's Day to all who celebrate. And happy Derek Carr retirement day for those of you connected to that world. That's certainly the lead here today. We'll spend a good amount of time on the financials, some of the facts and figures, and obviously the ramifications going forward of this somewhat shocking announcement that has flipped the switch a little bit for this New Orleans franchise. And then on the back end of this thing, we're going to flip the switch a little bit ourselves to baseball. We spent a lot of time last week discussing some of the who's who of what's next in the NFL world in terms of contract extensions and things like that. That's exactly the plan today for the Major League Baseball, because we're in the swing of things, no pun intended. It is the middle of May. Some of these divisions are lock and key. Some of these divisions are, let's just say, out of reach, and two managers have already been fired. So that is the marathon that is the MLB schedule in a nutshell. But it's also a good time to start projecting forward a little bit here, because we do have some outstanding performances happening by players who are in need of a contract in the 2025 winter. So we'll get there on the back end of this show. All right, Derek Carr, 11 seasons, mostly with the Raiders, the last few in New Orleans. We all assumed as of even May 1st that Derek Carr would be in New Orleans for one more season, not just because they were saying that out loud, but also because they had completely converted his salary for 2025 into signing bonus, basically burying that lead, stating, there's nothing we can do here contractually to get out of this thing. He had a $10 million guarantee walking into 2025. The remaining 30 on this contract guaranteed on March 15th. However, clearly a few weeks after that, he came forward himself, and that's kind of the theme here, by the way. This is his doing. He came forward and made note that somewhere in the late stages of 2024, he suffered a shoulder injury that was lingering and possibly even getting worse. And after a couple of opinions, it was recommended that he have surgery and go through a full rehab. Well, he's 34, just turned 34, which, by all accounts, could give him 3 to 4 solid years in this league. It was just expected that he would rehab through this thing. And oh, by the way, make himself $40 million in 2025 through the process, because that was guaranteed to him. And he certainly has an obligation or a right in terms of his own business sense, to stick with the organization and earn that money. That's not the case. Okay. And you can certainly understand this from an injury standpoint. He's been through the ringer a little bit, not as bad as others, but he's had his fair shake, and this was significant. Clearly, this was significant to the point of where, at his age, with his financial backing, and with the outlook of the team, and I don't think that can be discounted. This is not a contender. Okay. This is not a situation this year, certainly not even next year, that a player has to or is motivated to go through the rigmarole that is rehabbing a serious surgery and getting back to full life as much as possible. So I think a lot of signs were pointing in this direction, but to be quite frank, and to stick with the theme of our show here, I don't know how many people would walk away from $40 million, because that's what he's doing. Now, the reports, and they've been confirmed by his agent, he is handing $30 million of this back. And he will keep the $10 million roster bonus that, as I mentioned, was pre-guaranteed coming into this league year. All right, that vested last March. It was somewhat the low-hanging fruit on his contract in terms of really amplifying his dead cap for 2025 and thus making it really difficult for the New Orleans Saints to move on from him, something they probably would have done if not for the structure of his contract. Short, sweet, and mostly guaranteed, by the way. Take notes. So he will keep that $10 million, but he will hand back the $30 million, most of which was converted to signing bonus, but was put on an installment plan that would have been paid out throughout the year. So it's not like he's got any of that cash in his hand. Generally speaking, that's how this works. Even though the cap gymnastics happen in March, the payment structure still spreads out through the balance of what would be an off season and then the regular season on the biweekly. So he's not going to be paying back signing bonus. All right. He had an initial $28.5 million signing bonus back in 2023. 3/5 of that has not vested in terms of the cap. So there's a world where New Orleans can go after 3 iterations of $5.7 million or $17.1 million. That's not the case. Okay. So that's the team compromise, and the player compromise is, all right, I'm going to forfeit the $30 million. Okay. So in essence, we're talking about a situation here where the Saints are at least up 13 mil in this conversation when you talk about not recouping the signing bonus, but getting the $30 million back. So what does that mean? We'll stick with the cash part of it, then we'll flip to the cap and we'll look ahead a little bit here. As I mentioned, the financial backing is impressive, as you might imagine, with a quarterback who's played 11 seasons in the NFL. With the $10 million included that he will earn over the course of the next few months here, Derek Carr will be at $205.6 million for his career. And that's a second round pick, number 36 overall, with a rookie contract that paid out just over, let's see, because he only played 3 years, just over $4.3 million. So the starting point was low, and he put himself into big numbers. A 5-year, $125 million extension with the Raiders back in 2017 when things were going very, very well. That turned into a 3-year, $121.5 million extension at 30 years old with the Raiders. But he only saw 1 year of that, okay? Because that's when things got ugly. And he was released in February of 2023. And he walked into a situation in New Orleans where there were 3 or 4 teams bidding for him. He was able to put together a 4 for $150 package that included $60 million guaranteed right at signing in 2023 and $100 million practically guaranteed. Well, that $100 million, of course, includes the $30 million that he's giving back here. So it'll be a $70 million payout when it's all said and done on this contract for 2 years of service in New Orleans. Again, totaling up over $205 million in his 11-year career. It's a phenomenal backing. It's a phenomenal resume for what can be considered a good above average quarterback for most of his career, but certainly not anything greater than that. So, but that's where we're headed. Okay, I mean, if you think these numbers are eye popping now, you can imagine where some of these are going. And I put a tweet out, kind of rounding out the 2014 draft class in terms of quarterbacks, and certainly Carr is the breadwinner. But Jimmy Garoppolo, a player who's only got a couple of starting years under his belt, is well over the $125 million earned mark, and he's got a $3 million guarantee with the Rams in 2025 as well to keep on ticking. So even the guys who are not upper echelon are blowing past $100 million, all right, and heading pretty quickly towards $200 million by just surviving, all right? Good backup quarterbacks right now are averaging $4.5 million. That number is going to rise, in my opinion, by the end of this season because of some incentives that get paid out. But that's something we've been tracking quite heavily because obviously the starting quarterback tiers have exploded. All right. And Derek Carr has never been a backup quarterback, by the way. So he is on the lower side of what I would consider great starting quarterback pay. Much, much lower than the Cousins, the Rodgers, the Wilsons of the world who have, year after year somewhat fleeced this league financially speaking. But it's all trickling out, and it's all coming up with longevity with necessity. You're not allowed to carry 3 quarterbacks into the postseason. That helps in terms of roster spots and things like that. So it's a good time to be an able-bodied, intelligent, capable quarterback in this league, whether you're tier 1 or tier 3, because longevity is still getting you a pretty good payday. And Derek Carr certainly at the lower end of the starting quarterback pay, but there's a heck of a lot of players that don't make $200 million in this league. And he retires as one of them. So what happens now? He handed back $30 million. There was already a mess of a cap that they in New Orleans cleaned up in March, as they do with basically every contract that they're going to keep around in the incumbent season. It's significant, all right? And we're going to kind of project forward this cap credit that's going to happen, because unfortunately, this isn't the kind of thing that just pops into place quickly. We're awaiting the actual renegotiation document that will come in per this move. And once we see that, we'll know for sure if this is an immediate change or if this is something that will be credited after the season. But I've laid it out on the site as if this is just a June 1st retirement, where the contract has been renegotiated with the $30 million salary being relinquished. Okay, which means he's got $10 million of cash in 2025. Obviously, no cash to be earned next year, but they will keep this contract on the books through June 1st and then process the retirement, because there's still a decent amount of dead cap here. All right. I mean, this is not the situation where the player retires and everything just magically goes away. And I know that's how a lot of you still think some of these NFL contracts should work, but you can't have the massaging of the cap and the cap gymnastics and have clean breaks when it's all said and done. And we're certainly heading more towards more messy breakups with voids and things like that than we ever have been in this league. So this is another example of that, with the caveat of a really interesting, unique payback retirement situation. So there were 3 void years on this contract, as you'll see in New Orleans, 2 remaining years in 25 and 26. The onus will be this: assuming the cap is immediately credited and the renegotiation hits immediately, we're dealing with about $14.4 million of dead cap for the upcoming season, which is a significantly smaller number, obviously, than what his cap was to start this season. Okay. So after the renegotiation in March that converted most of this salary into signing bonus, Derek Carr's salary cap hit dropped down to $20.4 million. All right. So take away the $30 million and the proration that goes with it, and we've got the current June 1st salary at about $14.4 million. So $6 million of savings based on what will be credited back per the payback of the $30 million salary for 2025. Flip to next year with this post June 1st situation, there's still $35.6 million of dead cap. Okay. From 3 other signing bonuses, I should say, 2 of those being cap conversions in both 2024 and from the roster bonus in 2025. So still a little bit of pain. Okay. 14.5 this year, 35.5 next year. That's salary cap. Okay. The only cash payment to be made is that $10 million roster bonus this season. And that's it. We're scotch free from there. Now, there may be a situation here with this renegotiation that roster bonus is not converted to signing bonus, that they accelerate that all into 2025, take a little bit more dead cap this year. We've seen all sorts of things happen in the magic of a renegotiation. But I think the safe assumption out of the gate here is about 14.5 this year, 35.5 next year. And obviously, with the subtraction of $30 million overall here, this is a huge win financially for the New Orleans Saints, who are going to be dealing with a $50 million dead cap hit next year, 50 million plus. That's no longer the case. It's a very platable 35.5, which if we project that against just a $300 million salary cap, okay, is a very doable 11% or so. Okay. It's a big win for an organization that probably needed a little bit of relief like this. There's no question that this was part of the process. Okay. Derek Carr feels bad about how things have gone. And I'm putting words in his mouth because I'm projecting it. Terrible about the injury situation that has completely derailed their 2025 scenario to the point of where, the Saints, I think, smartly went up and drafted Tyler Shuck way earlier than I think many of us were ready for him to go. And he now projects to be the week 1 starter. So this was all in the back of everybody's mind, no question about it. But you don't just hand back $30 million without a motive. Okay. And the motive here is to help the team. Okay. To give the team a solid for the $70 million payout, for all the amenities, for, the employment. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that do this. And I want to say that as many times as possible on this episode. What Derek Carr did is not something many athletes, many people, many humans would choose to do. I get it. He made $205 million. I get it. And I'm not going to, throw him a parade, but Saints fans should be, because this is significant not only for, maybe getting into a new chapter at the quarterback position, something a lot of people were trying to get to this year. And Derek Carr's contract was not allowing that to happen. So not only do they get to see some fresh blood on the field, they get out of a big mess. I mean, this is a huge, huge difference to go from what was in the 80s of dead cap to down into the 50s over a 2-year split. It's a big deal. And it will help New Orleans immediately in terms of flipping this roster. They have draft capital next season when it's a loaded draft for a lot of reasons, as it was this year. And if they hit on a few of these draft picks this year, this could easily become a quick turn and burn back into legitimate division contention for this roster. So it's a win. It's a terrible, unfortunate situation for Carr, whose career, like I said, is probably cut 3-4 years short because of this. It's an unbelievable gesture to hand back the $30 million. And a lot of people will be thinking about the cash and the earnings. And of course, we live in the cap world with the cap goggles on, and it's going to be a significant aid in that regard as well to the benefit of this entire Saints organization and to the benefit of what will be in March of 2026 for the Saints roster, as they are potentially looking to build around a competent Tyler Shuck. A lot of people think that could be the case. So it's a big deal. It's a big turnaround. It's a big about face. And it's a big cap credit as well. Whether that happens now or at the end of the season remains to be seen. We'll certainly keep our pulse on that when the documents are all processed and filed accordingly. All right, let's flip the switch to baseball a little bit here. I don't do this too much, but I have my own version of this somewhere. And certainly we have our market valuations being pushed out on the daily and updated on the daily. But I'm not going to step in the way of somebody's amazing work. And that's exactly what Jeff Passan did about a week ago for ESPN.com. And boy, when ESPN loses Major League Baseball, I sure hope Jeff Passan gets a hell of a job, because in terms of everything that he can bring to the table, he's just a different thinker. And he's generally ahead of most of the other markets in terms of getting content like this out there. So we've been talking about this quite a bit with Dan Silman on this show, just because it's the nature of what we do full time. But Jeff has laid out by tiers, by financial tiers, players who can, should, may, might get to the 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, $600 million mark, contractually speaking, over the course of the next, let's just say 3-4 seasons here, 3-4 off seasons. It's a huge list that's mixed with pending free agents, veterans who need new contracts, and 22-year-olds who barely have, 15 plate appearances, but you can tell are in contention for some sort of pre-arbitration extension. So these are the names we've been talking about kind of ad nauseum internally here. And Jeff just did God's work to kind of put this all into a really nice tiered structure on ESPN.com. Please check that out as you reference what I'm about to say here. So I'm going to start at the bottom and kind of finagle my way through a couple of names as we go backwards, because as I mentioned with Dan not too long ago, I'm not sure that there's a Vlad Jr., Juan Soto type contract even sitting actively in Major League Baseball. And Jeff didn't come out and necessarily say that. He does have a player in the $600 million tier. But I can tell you right now that the way that he has stated as this player as such, and the way that a lot of people are talking about the organization as a whole, there's a lot of pause about Gunnar Henderson actually getting to this point. Now, does he have the best ability to get there? I think that's right. He is the Bobby Witt. He is the 5-tool, can light up a lineup, whether he's leading off or cleaning up, and he can do both. He's a great defender. He's an energy guy. He's a clubhouse guy. Everything about it, right? The tangibles and the intangibles that could add up to $700 million at some point in time when we're talking about an inflated, adjusted league over the course of the next couple of off seasons. Okay. The war is there. The power is there. The problem is this. Okay. Juan Soto began his career with the Washington Nationals. No surprise there. It was a team that had a ton of youth. Okay. The Bryce Harpers, the Juan Sotos, the Trey Turners, the Steven Strasburgs, the Corbins. It was built to win soon. And for some reason, all those pieces together just didn't get to that next level during the Juan Soto era. So they were the team that was ramping up properly, had drafted successfully, but for some reason wasn't plugging in the right pieces from a free agent standpoint to become a winning baseball team, both in the division and in the National League as a whole. So the contractual offers that were handed from Washington to Juan Soto were aggressive, but not nearly as aggressive as it needed to be to get he and Scott Boras to think anything differently about signing early with the Washington team that wasn't winning ball games on a regular basis and wasn't going to blow the doors off in terms of financial structure. So I think about that right now as I think about Gunnar Henderson, who is brand new in this league, but is already decorated, has already gone through the loops. This is his third arbitration season, so he will be arbitration eligible next year. So that the finances will start to add up for an organization that is very concerned about that. Let's put it that way, for everybody on the roster. So it's a good time to start talking about this. Here's the problem. If you spend any time on sports social media over the past 2 months, the Orioles are the butt of everybody's jokes because they didn't aggressively put the foot down in free agency for the 19th time in a row. Okay, they did let quality players that they had acquired via trade, the best way for them to build the roster, by the way, walk away for one reason or another, most of it being contractually obligated. And now they're in the dumpster. Now they're in the basement of the American League East, and every team above them, with the exception of the Rays, who just continue to be Tampa Bay, even in the worst situations at a minor league field with all their pitching staff on the shelf, they continue to be even better than this Baltimore team that does have extremely talented in-house, homegrown, drafted players that look the part. They look like the perfect core to develop into that into that World Series, at least contender. And oh, by the way, I don't mean to leave this out, but the year that Juan Soto left, Bryce Harper and the Nationals won the World Series. So, not for nothing. The problem is, the point is this. Gunnar Henderson, still a great player, but that entire Orioles team has taken a major 4 steps down the ladder this year because of the team as a whole. And we've been through this before. And the second part of this, which matters maybe more, is that Scott Boras is his agent. So Scott Boras has been through this a dozen times with superstar tier 1 players that may not want to be on this team for the next 14 years, even if that means $650 million total dollars guaranteed. Number one, I can't imagine the Orioles making that offer. And number two, I can't imagine Scott Boras taking the offer right now. So while he probably does fit the mold as the player that has the best chance to get to this next insane tier, it's just not there for me yet, for all the reasons I just laid out. So what's next? Okay, because the next tier that Jeff Passan lays out here is extremely interesting. And it starts with Kyle Tucker, who is a pending free agent for the Chicago Cubs, a team that is, by all accords, a World Series contender right now. And part of that is because they acquired Kyle Tucker from the Houston Astros this past winter. He is a more complete player than many of the names I've just mentioned to you, with the exception of Gunnar Henderson, though that's arguable because Kyle Tucker has been doing above average to elite things for a full 6+ seasons in Houston and now in Chicago. And he's on track to have another outstanding swan song year as he heads towards free agency. Okay. This is the name you're going to hear the most over the course of the next few months because Vlad Jr. has signed, because many of the pieces have already fallen. He's not a Boris guy. He's an Excel guy. It matters. Okay. It just matters at the end of the day for a lot of teams, for a lot of front offices, how this negotiation is going to go into place. Should the Cubs be paying him? Yes. Should Kyle Tucker take a contract right now? No. For all the reasons I just laid out, he's going to be the name. And when you're that guy, you have to go and let 12 teams buy you a steak and make you an offer. It's just due diligence. Even if your intention is to stay with your team, and that means you may have to stretch them out for an extra 20, 25 million. It's just your obligation. The arbitration process in baseball is too long, too restricted, and for the most part, though it's improving, not enough financially backed. This is Kyle Tucker's big chance to go out there and do it. I would reverse this a little bit from Passan and make him the absolute primary player right now. And because he is now the guy in terms of the upcoming free agency, it's going to be his winter. I do think there's a world where Kyle Tucker gets close to this $600 mark, $600 million mark. I do. And here's how I think it gets there. If the Cubs remain this good, and if they can bolster their starting pitching that has been battered with injury over the past couple of weeks here, and if they can maintain this, winning in Chicago, doesn't have to be the World Series, a good playoff run in Chicago where he is the focal point, offensively speaking, it just matters more. It'll be a national story. It'll be something that the big people like Passan are talking about constantly. He will be the reason that the Cubs went from ladder rung 6 to ladder rung 9 because he was the big acquisition this offseason. It'll be all about Kyle Tucker on a national presence, taking the Cubs back to the promised land in some capacity. And when that happens, the price just goes up, as we've seen now with so many players, Juan Soto included, with his Yankees run last year. Okay. Kyle Tucker's not Juan Soto. Kyle Tucker's not as dynamic as Gunnar Henderson is to start his career. And Kyle Tucker's nowhere near Shohei Ohtani. But he is in the conversation of, in my opinion, between 500 and 600 million. And I do think 600 is very achievable when we're talking about the amount of teams that still need that right field corner outfielder that can hit 40 doubles, 40 home runs, and kind of just goes about his business without saying too much out loud. And by the way, that's going to be refreshing for some organizations as well. But I can tell you right now, the Dodgers are in. The Yankees are in. Okay? They're in on Kyle Tucker. And when those two teams specifically are going to be leading the charge, yes, some of the smaller markets will drop out, but not all of them. And you will have a half a dozen good, solid financial offers here. And when that happens, 500 becomes 600 pretty quickly in this league. The other name Passan has here, I really like, and it's a name I mentioned. It's a team I mentioned with Dan Soman before the season. Hasn't quite come to fruition in terms of the standings as we speak here. I'm going to look quickly. The Cincinnati Reds, 20-22, fourth in the National League Central, a division that is airtight from the Cubs down to the Reds. But Elly De La Cruz is another guy. Okay. He's one of those players, just a tick under Gunnar Henderson in terms of power production and what he can do on a daily basis. But it just feels like he's one of those guys that came into this sport, let alone this league, as a freak athlete that was just figuring things out as he goes. And it kind of feels like we're still in that ballpark with him, that the athleticism of the game, he mastered day one. But the nuances and the strategy and maybe even some of the balance it takes to go 162 games, he's still figuring that out. Well, he's got Terry Francona now for all of the latter portion of this. And nothing made me more excited than that this offseason, as I stated in the preview stuff. This room of kids led by De La Cruz now has maybe the best active mentor to calm things down, balance things out, and eventually, at some point here soon, progress into what I think could be a division contender for this National League Central. He's going to be the cornerstone piece. So if the Reds are going to make any kind of significant offer, it's going to be for him. It's just 2 seasons of service now for De La Cruz. So all of this, including the contract, has plenty of time to permeate. But there's no question that he's in the conversation of this $500 million contract at some point in time. The problem is this. He's not Bobby Witt Jr., okay, who came in, exceeded expectations, won Rookie of the Year, became the face of the franchise and a national presence. De La Cruz has his moments when he steals home, when he makes great plays at shortstop, etc. But he doesn't have the resume on the field as of yet that Bobby Witt Jr. does. And Bobby Witt Jr. went up for 11 years and $289 million. Now, there's plenty of you can add over $100 million to this in terms of incentives and things like that. So he's at least in the $400 million ballpark when it's all said and done. But that takes him to age 37. His career contract has a maximum value of $378 million. That's what Bobby Witt Jr. did. And by the way, great for him, great for the Royals. But if De La Cruz doesn't take that path and sign some sort of extension after this upcoming offseason, I do think we're talking about a situation where he gets into the arbitration years and we're talking about numbers that look like Soto, that look like what Gunnar can get and what Kyle Tucker's about to get to, because he does play a prominent position, obviously, as Witt Jr. does, as Tatis Jr. did when he signed. And he does have the dynamic speed element to the game that is now becoming as important as it's been in 2 decades in this league. One more name, and we'll get out of here. And the only reason I need to get there is, it's a big name, obviously, and that's Paul Skeens, but also very en vogue right now in the news with the firing of the coach, firing of the hitting coach, the promotion of a guy in Don Kelly who clearly is going to take things in a slightly different direction, but doesn't have the best resume himself to get there. There's just a lot of sitting duck situations happening for this team, and unfortunately, it's been decades long. Look, they had a heyday with that McCutchen, Marte. It was a good run for a while there. You know, they've had Garrett Cole, they've had Chris Beck, they've had some players. Okay, AJ Burnett even for a couple of years before he moved on to the big boys. And that's, I think, where this is heading. All right. And Jeff Passan wouldn't go out there and say that, and I don't blame him. But Paul Skeens winning Rookie of the Year, having a nice start to his 2025, but now the rest of the team crumbling around him. What's to be expected here? Because the only contract we're talking about with Paul Skeens today, right now, is a contract with the Pirates. And that just seems like an impossible task. A, for them to make an offer, and B, for him to accept anything. Now, he's not a Boris guy. Let's get that on the record. He's currently with ISC Baseball. He's making a lot of money off the field. There's a lot of reasons not to take a contract right now. And one of them is that starting pitchers are not getting big contracts anymore. Okay. And there's a variety of reasons, as we've laid out here, that can dictate where that's headed. And it's very well documented and in the back of people's minds that Paul Skeens has not gone through his injury stretch yet. Okay. He is Tommy John free at 22 years old. And unfortunately, that's rare, which is hard to believe, but that's the youth game of baseball right now in its flesh. As of today, the largest starting pitcher contract in terms of total value is $325 million. That's Yamamoto, who signed that at 24 years old from Japan to the Dodgers. Garrett Cole's $324 still remains second, even though that has some caveats, but the opt-out that was bypassed and things like that, and certainly him being on the shelf this year brings that back to the forefront. But Max Fried was the big free agent signing last year, 218 with the Yankees. Corbin Burns got 210 from the Diamondbacks. So that's your top four right there. Starting pitcher contracts in all of baseball. So Passon's got both Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens. He's, the Cy Young kind of darlings in this league right now in the $400 million bucket, which would be the biggest contract for a starting pitcher in the history of baseball. I just don't know that position right now is valued high enough. I just don't know. Okay. And, Skubal's had a good couple year run here, obviously, and he's right back at it. These Tigers are feisty, and he is the top of that mountain here. So to say that he could pass Yamamoto, Skubal, because he's in a better contractual situation to do so, is to me a no-brainer. Okay, he's 28 years old. There's going to be, a 10-year offer out there for Skubal, whether that's to remain with the Tigers organization or not. We've got Skubal at an 8 for $225. And that's updated as of a couple days ago. So $28 million a year, it's well under the top of the market. And I can tell you it's not because he's not pitching well. He's pitching fine. Okay. He's pitching just fine. Everything else has come down. So when we go to evaluate Tarek Skubal's production against all the other top contracts in Major League Baseball at this position, we just don't have high enough contracts to get us into the Yamamoto world on a regular basis. It would take an absolutely mind-blowing statistical productive year from a starting pitcher to go above and beyond what the percentages in the algorithm need to get us into the $300 million mark, and it'd have to be a young pitcher. Now, where does Paul Skeens fall on this list? Well below, because the sample size is so small. So it's not incorrect for Jeff Passan to be saying these two players are going to be the top tier, contractually speaking, at the starting pitching role. And Skubal will probably be before Skeens for all the reasons we laid out here, and you probably already know. But to even think that at 28, 29 years old here, 30 years old, that he can get a $10 million contract, a 10-year contract, that's tough, because front offices have just put their foot down in that regard. So if we're talking about a $350 million contract and it's 8 years, that's a $44 million APY, which would be the highest in the history of Major League Baseball for a pitcher. Okay, that's Scherzer, that's Verlander, and a little bit under that would be Zach Wheeler right now with the Phillies. All worthy, but what we're talking about here is just to get him to 350, not 400, over an 8-year span would make him the highest average paid pitcher in the history of baseball. That's a tough ask. It's a tough ask for front offices, but it's going to be the ask. That's going to be the floor for Tarek Skubal over the course of the next few off seasons here with the Detroit Tigers, who, by the way, are probably just going to have to pay it because they've gone through this. They've seen this movie before a couple times, letting top players walk out this door and go win World Series immediately elsewhere. So they're in their window. That one seems a lot more prudent for the conversation we're having, but not Paul Skeens. So I would be remiss to leave him out of this conversation, but it's time to leave him out of this conversation for now, because no sane person within that Pirates organization is making the offer worthy, and no sane person standing around Paul Skeens right now is picking up the phone and answering that call. Okay. The only conversation we're having about Paul Skeens and these type of numbers happens after a trade. And we're going to have that conversation soon, but I'm going to let this season breathe a little bit more and see where we land maybe around the 4th of July. And then we'll talk about it, because it's not often that 22-year-old starting pitchers come into our lives and are this good, this fast, this quickly for now almost a full 2 seasons. But that's where we'll be at with Skeens. And if the extension possibility is out the door and they don't have 6 or 7 players on this roster that they hope are there in 7 years, and I don't think they do, then trading Paul Skeens and talking about the package that they could get back that could actually project the Pittsburgh Pirates into a division contender again might be the actual conversation to have. We're not going to have it today, but it's coming, and we're going to monitor that situation closely. So quickly. Tara Skubal as the pitcher. It's going to be the winter of Kyle Tucker. Ellie De La Cruz is maybe a full season under Terry Francona away from being ready for this conversation. And Gunnar Henderson just needs some help from his front office. And that doesn't mean but with his contract. It means with other contracts that can put him in a situation where sticking around for another 12 years in this organization is actually something he wants to do, regardless of what that bottom line looks like at the end of the day. All right. We'll get back to football with some schedule stuff Thursday, some basketball playoffs as some teams bow out, I think, here over the next couple of days. We'll talk about some off seasons for those teams going forward and plenty more on the next edition of the Spot Track Podcast. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Track Podcast.